Well, it's not even that you have to start, but like, what is the conversation? Like, are you even having a conversation around it? Of like, why do we do this? What is it in, like, is this working for us and why? And so there's just some of that too. Like, it's not even the right or wrong. It's the like, what are you even talking about this? Or are you just rotely doing things because it's always been that way?
Are you looking for ways to shorten your marketing learning curve and help your organization survive and thrive? Welcome to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast, a show for purpose-focused leaders who want to use marketing techniques to fuel their organization's growth. If you're a returning listener and you haven't subscribed already, we'd love to have you. Also, please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Now here's your host, author and marketing specialist, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here. My guests today have a really unique challenge in that they have some pretty big hurdles to overcome when trying to get their audience engaged with the services that they provide in DEI training. They do some really great work to try to develop better thinking and different thinking among current leadership, as well as to try to bring up today's youth in a way that really has a focus on DEI, and they do great work. Maren Miller and Nikki Murillo are part of the SHIFT program over at Building Bridges, and they're just doing some really great things. We did identify some interesting opportunities for them to not only reframe their story or tell it a little bit more effectively, but also to try to kind of attack those objections that they get when they're attempting to bring on new clients. It was a really fun discussion. We talked a lot about DEI in general, and then there are some real actionable items here during our talk that I think will be helpful for almost everyone out there to try and improve their story and really address the issues that people have with either supporting your organization or engaging with it. I hope you enjoy our conversation. I had a lot of fun. Here we go. Maren and Nikki, how are you two?
Doing well, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm very excited to learn more about what you're doing over at Building Bridges. Tell us all a little bit about what you do over there.
Oh, where to begin? Building Bridges has actually been around for the past 25 years. It stemmed from working with and served for young adults, young women in the subject of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, occupation. It brought together young women to get with those identities, as well as some folks from the United States. And we have built over the 25 years a posture, a way to bring out conversation dialogue. So conflict transformation, cross-cultural relationship building, young building skills and communication and empathy are our jam and kind of the core of what we do. And what has happened is that has looked different over time. So that's where we started. And now the last 5 years have actually started to focus on more locally here in Denver, Colorado. So deciding that what was happening in our first iteration needed to transfer abroad and more locally. And so we did the same here, and it's been in the last 5 years that we've been working in the Denver metro area, working with young folks, high school age. And then with that transfer here, also closely relating to and in relationship with hearing from these young folks that, I'm doing this training, essentially coming to a summer intensive and working with folks monthly, and then building up a change project at the end of the year. We're building up skills around identity development, around understanding systems of oppression, and gaining all this language and knowledge, and hearing other narratives and experiences of their peers, and then would come up against adults in their lives, their teachers or coworkers or whatever, and come up against folks who didn't have those skills. And so SHIFT was born, and that's what Nikki and I are a part of is we just have two forms of programming now. We have Transform, which is our young adult programming, and we have Shift, which is our adult programming. And ultimately, our streamline of that is we are building a movement of inclusive leaders. And by creating spaces for dialogue, by creating spaces for building communication skills, and really delving into ultimately the hard conversations. And so Shift has been through its own metamorphosis in the last 5 years, especially with the pandemic. We, like many folks, moved to being online. And now, partly why we're here, I think today is 2022 happened. And we're finding ourselves in another new kind of land of DEI, of nonprofit work, of what is it to engage organizations in the conversation of intersectionality, of race, gender. What is it to belong and be quote unquote professional and create a culture that is as inclusive as possible so folks can really thrive and be their full selves in whatever context that they're in.
Yeah, it's an interesting landscape right now, I think, and it's really great to hear how you're trying to put together language, at least, to get those conversations started, because I think there's a large percentage of the population that just don't even really have a great understanding of how to start talking about things, and a lot of people have taken an adversity sort of approach to that, which is not great to see, but it does feel like there's movement, and I'm just excited to hear how you're a part of that, and how you're bringing all that knowledge that you've gained through the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and how you're applying some of that to some of this new shift that we're experiencing. Mm-hmm. How did you make that transition? What were some of the things was it just you saw an opportunity, or was there a natural sort of progression there, or how did that change come about?
When we made the shift from being more local and focused in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was before my time at Building Bridges. We had some of our colleagues, ultimately felt, I believe that it was a big shift in the fact that, like what we were doing and then moving to this, ultimately, we lost donors, we lost followers. There was a huge community that was built around this one way of being, right? And mm-hmm. It made sense, again, that what we were learning, that folks in that location were going to be able to be closer to really navigating the conversation and the folks who were being impacted the most. And ultimately was why, okay, so then we need to do the same and really focus on young folks here in the United States, because there is plenty going on here to navigate when it comes to understanding self and understanding systems and coming up against racism, sexism, all the isms. And what do you do with that? And I think there's a bigger conversation that is more and more happening specifically in schools around it, right? But we're also seeing another form of backlash of that around CRT and all of that. But the kind of the base of what we do is building dialogue skills. What is it to listen? What is it to ask questions? What is it to learn, be able to really start considering why, or what's happening in this group, and what will I be able to learn versus what have I been conditioned to do as a person, mm-hmm. to maybe try and be the all-knower or say all the right things. What if we're just trying to be human beings navigating this together? And we've experienced some really beautiful conversations, some really hard conversations, whether it was with our young folks or with adults.
Yeah, I bet. There's a lot of challenges going on right now in terms of people really understanding it, and understanding the shift that is happening. And it sounds to me like you had some backlash when you made this adjustment in your focus. Tell me a little bit more about that. Is that something that happened before you joined Building Bridges, or is that something that you have an understanding of?
Yeah, again, now I don't know, there was a certain pivot. And so with that pivot, with this new vision of we are actually going to center racial equity in what we do was one of those big spots. I, again, wasn't a part of those conversations, but have heard through other colleagues that was the case. And so it's the last 5 years that we've been evolving in what is it to have our conversations centered around racial equity. And we've learned a whole bunch along the way as well, that we lean into what we call contact theory, we lean into group development theory, and have learned the hard way in some scenarios of what is it to be really intentional about who's in the room, and when is it maybe a time to have affinity spaces. And so that's also what is a main thing that we do with the adults, with our adult programming. I'm the community training manager, and we have been offering trainings to the greater community, and those have specifically been affinity spaces as we've come up specifically seeing white folks in leadership and white folks in general just needing a little bit more before we can go into some other conversations of intersectionality or other conversations of gender dynamics or other forms of power that exist within a group. What is it to make sure that we have that base or that foundation before we complicate it even more?
Right, before you throw it into a mix of a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, because when we talk about DEI, right, it's not just diversity, it's not just race, right? But because it's a plethora of things to consider to be as inclusive as possible, and it's not easy to do. Right.
Do you feel like the challenges there are because of this historical privilege that either white folks don't have the language around, or just they don't understand that position that they've held, just because of the nature of their birth?
Yeah, that was my experience as well as a white person, as I was a former teacher for 10 years, and it wasn't until the end of my career that I got a significant amount of training and support and opportunity to also be in dialogue, and to be messy about it, and to really start to break down the very kind of narrow experience that I have, the identities and experiences that I have, and what is it for me to start to break out of that to the possibility that other folks are experiencing the world in different ways. And it's not as simple as that there's a good people and bad people out there. There's systems that have been set up, and that from the inception of our country, things are still affecting people today. And what do I do to rectify the history that I wasn't taught, or the very skewed narratives that I did consume? How do I get better at just being curious and question everything that I think I know? That's a hard place for anybody, let alone, specifically white folks, in kind of this reckoning. And it was interesting to really see such be a part of what is a predictable pattern now, is some really like an expansion of engagement 2 years ago in 2020 around George Floyd's murder. And people were knocking down our door and wanting to incorporate this in their work. And, that was itself, as a small nonprofit, exciting and also really hard. Shift is our social enterprise piece, and Transform is our kind of more traditional nonprofit covered by grants. So there's been this interesting experience of watching the engagement slowly trickle down. And I don't maybe pass to Nikki of what feels like 2022, it struck 2022 and it was I don't know, crickets, just there was a something in the air. Something changed drastically around what we had been experiencing and prepping for as regards to client work and community trainings. And it's been, messy to navigate the last 6 months.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So Nikki, you're the interim executive director of Building Bridges and Shift and Transform, correct? It's all under the one.
So our Shift and Transform programs are our two, big programs. So like Maren said, our Transform program is kind of our flagship. That's what we're mostly known for. And then our Shift program was sort of born out of that. And and together it is all building bridges. And I am have been the interim executive director for about a month or so now.
Oh wow! So very, very short tenure so far.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're coming into this mix in some interesting times for Building Bridges.
Yeah.
What have been some of the more challenging aspects of this new role that you're filling right
now? I think going back a little bit to what Maren was just saying around we had all kinds of plans for 2022. We had planned out our community trainings for the whole year. We had started looking at the social enterprise piece for our client contract work that we try to engage in. Is we were starting to plan out for that, and then all of a sudden we were just finding that there was a shift in the mood, and we were still getting quite a bit of interest from other nonprofits and organizations who were interested in DEI work. That's kind of the kitschy term, right? The DEI trainings, DEI workshops, and we were sort of fielding all of these questions of like, well, what do you all do, and what could we expect, and how much does it cost? And part of our leap for this year was sort of streamlining and I sort of getting more organized in what we offer, how we offer it, and how we engage with clients, how we engage with folks in the community who are interested in doing this work. And so we were eager to get some folks in the door so that we could actually practice some of these processes that we were putting into place. Mm-hmm. And what we have found is that so lots of budgetary restrictions and limitations, folks who are eager and interested in doing trainings, workshops, providing professional personal development for their staff, but they have no money. There's no money in their budget. They've spent it all in the last 2 years, the 2020, 2021 budget years. And so now they're here in 2022 and they're like, well, we want more work. We know we need more work, but we don't have any money. And so, we've been trying to get really creative with like, okay, well, what do you want out of this time? Like, what is it that you're hoping to accomplish? And where can we start? Where's like step one? Knowing that one of the pieces that we try to really hone in on is long-term work, right? That the DEI work, the work of racial equity is not a one-time training. It's not a 2-hour workshop. It's a long-term sustainable plan and strategy. And we build everything that we do with that in mind. And so we recognize that folks are, maybe no longer have the line item specifically for this work. And so they're kind of having to pull from different areas. And so we just try to work with folks of like, where can we start? Where's step one? Maybe let's get some coaching hours in. Maybe let's get a 3-part series in. Let's see where we can sort of start to make an inroad, and then work with, sort of walk alongside these organizations to help, create that long-term plan in the making, I guess, as we're building the plane in flight.
Right.
As they say.
So it sounds like there's been budget cuts that have affected you. So you have a few mechanisms by which you get revenue. I'm assuming donations, grants, and then is it pay per service? Is that
our client work is pay for service. We do have a lot of grants that we typically pursue. And we're also seeing a shift in that as well, which has been really interesting. We work with a grant writer who has been with us and in it with us for a long time, knows us well, and she herself is even saying that she's noticing a shift in some of the funders and the folks who are getting funded. And so we've had a hard time with that as well this year.
Well, and we've also, our Transform is essentially supported by grants. It was more this year. Again, another plan of ours was to get Shift supported a little bit more in order to be able to maybe pick or choose who we worked with, or work with some of the folks who were maybe more along the lines of us, of a very small team, really wanting to do this work, want to strategize, maybe even work. The other thing that we've been moving into this year is being a worker-led co-op. And so that has just been also, a parallel to all the work that we're doing externally. We've been trying to do it internally, and that's been hard, and our capacity is lower. And so it's, we're trying to mitigate what is it to do that, go slow to go fast, and do this as ourselves, as well as be able to support others in that. It's also that, we've got one side of the folks are willing to share money with young adults, which is wonderful. And what is it for us to be able to, because there's so many folks who still could benefit from a whole bunch of these conversations.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm trying to come up with some ideas here for you. It sounds to me like the sales cycle may have extended quite a bit, which is not helpful when you're used to it being, 2 months or 3 months or whatever, however long you're used to, and then having that, be stretched out for quite some time. And it sounds like you're trying to make changes to allow it to be as affordable for people as possible. Have you identified what the what the cost of action or non-action is for people? Like what's at stake for your clients, particularly in the shift world, I guess?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure that, at least I have really considered the cost of not, other than I think a lot of folks who come to us are, I guess I would say it's maybe half and half, that there are folks who come to us who are either looking to make some changes. They want to make some changes to their hiring processes. They want to make some changes to their, staff culture. They're interested in kind of growing from the learnings that they've gained over the last however many years. And then there are another handful of folks that have come to us potentially because something happened. There's some kind of crisis, some kind of exodus of staff members or things that have sort of exposed themselves to be concerning to, leaders of an organization. And, one of the pieces that we have found is a really good starting point not only for us, but for an organization, is to focus in on the leadership and really try to understand like what is happening among the folks who hold the most power in this organization. What are their norms? What are their ideologies? What is holding this sort of culture in place based on these folks who are in leadership positions? And I guess kind of going back to this idea of what is the cost of not, it's really kind of getting sort of stuck in what has been, what is, and not being able to dream about what could be and finding these other ways of being and existing. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do internally with Building Bridges and our shift in governance to more of a co-op model. And it's interesting, we've had a couple clients or prospective clients who have come to us saying, we're actually trying out shared leadership, or we're trying to figure out what it means to be, have co-executive directors. We're trying to figure out what, this new governance model looks like for us. And we're like, well, us too. And so we may be just a few steps ahead or in a different place. So let's see what we can offer in that respect as well. And so again, it's really just about trying to open up these opportunities for dreaming of other ways of being and sort of starting to dismantle the notion of what is the quote unquote norm in the workplace, and what professionalism means, and all of those kinds of those ideas.
Yeah, it's interesting you're doing that. Like you said earlier, you're kind of building the plane as you're flying it. There are a couple things that I'm seeing on the site that potentially could be helpful. And that is really starting to deliver content on a regular basis that speaks to those types of needs and challenges. Where I was going, I think, with my initial question, and as you were talking, I was kind of digging into a few things here on the site that I see. But my original question was essentially if you can establish, and particularly if you can get the person to establish for themselves what the cost, what the benefit of action is, or what the cost of inaction is, then you've established what a value it is for them. And even if they start off like, kind of wishy-washy about it, if you can get them to, and this is kind of a sales technique, but if you can get them to out loud, put a dollar figure on what it's costing them to lose teammates, or not be able to hire as quickly as they would like to have these open positions in their organizations or businesses. If you can get them to establish that value, then that gives you a starting point for what it would require from an investment standpoint with you to help fix that problem and to plug that leak. And once you've kind of gotten down to brass tacks on that, it makes it a lot easier for them to understand why they're making that investment. And until you're able to do that, it does feel like one of these things that they're like, well, do I really need to get this tooth fixed now, or can I wait on it? And there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's opportunity cost as well as actual cost. And so the longer that it takes to plug that leak, the longer they're just going to be hemorrhaging, money or opportunity. And so, there's certainly a lot of companies out there really seeking to plug a significant hole in their DEI practices. They've been called out on this. They're getting, grief in the media. And so those companies, I think, obviously would benefit, if they're taking it seriously, would benefit from your expertise in that area to just help them with that problem immediately. And then there are other organizations that are probably already moving, the direction of improved, diversity, equity and inclusion, but maybe they just want a little help getting there. And so kind of figuring out how to identify, those people who have an urgent need that's critical versus those who have an express need that's more of a desired goal. And just having a good understanding of who those groups are would be something to entertain, I think, on your end.
Yeah, I think another piece that we have started to think about too are, and this is in from support from a coach that we've been working with, around how to envision, what our ideal client is. And one of those pieces has been trying to figure out what are the limiting beliefs that they might hold that are stopping them from taking this opportunity that you're putting in front of them.
Yeah. Like, how painful is this going to be?
Yeah, exactly.
Not only from an investment standpoint, but how much time is it going to take, and also how much are they going to have to look into the depths of their being, and see how a lot of the stuff that they believe that they have achieved might be built on the keeping down of other people, and how's that going to make them feel? I think that starting to develop a content program around those types of things would be helpful. I'm guessing that you have seen kind of some common, there's probably a little bit of a common journey. It's kind of like that, the 6 steps of what's I'm losing the thread on what this is called, but like the 6 steps of understanding, or of acceptance, right? Where you're angry, and then you're in denial, and then you kind of move through all these steps. And my guess is that a lot of people kind of have a similar journey when they first embark on this exploration around DEI and how to improve that in their own organizations. So maybe, even just creating content around that, like, hey, we know there's going to be some challenging steps here, and here's how we see people, typically engaging with this process. So don't be alarmed when this happens to you, where, at some point you might feel really sad about where you are, and that's okay, because that's part of the process. And just allowing people to have a really strong understanding of what this is going to be like, and just putting it out there will help. And then letting people know that they're not the first people to go through this, that this isn't a unique experience, that they're not alone.
Yeah, definitely. I think that what you're talking about is that acknowledgement of grief, right? That in some ways you kind of have to be willing to lose an idea that you were maybe holding on to that was sort of comforting in some ways, but maybe holding you back in other ways. And I think one of the, we've over time have definitely learned to refine our the time that we do have in front of prospective clients, right? Like we usually do a 1 hour screen call when someone reaches out and says, hey, we're interested in working with you. We say, great, let's set up a screen call. We're on a Zoom call for an hour, and we really try to spend a lot of that time hearing from them. But then we also recognize that we have a very great opportunity to set up what they can expect from us, to sort of say, all right, if this is a good fit, here's what you can expect, both in a sense of we don't want to we're not going to promise like a nice, pretty bow at the end. Like everything's going to be wrapped up in a nice box and it's going to feel like butterflies and rainbows. It's just not, it's not going to be that way. And we want to be gracious and kind and thoughtful and empathetic to the process, right? And so folks who are usually coming to us seeking that support or have maybe already gone through their own level of acceptance or anger, denial around grief. And it's the rest of the team that is maybe needing some support with like how to navigate that and how to even be aware that that might be a possibility. So yeah, trying to sort of hold all of the different experiences that might come across.
Yeah. It's a little tough to sell this idea that you're never going to be done with this.
Thank you.
Part of the program. I do a lot of coaching work, both personally, for myself, but also with clients. And one of the things that is an interesting a piece of the equation is the idea that I have 50 plus years of doing things a certain way, and it's worked for me, and I've never done it this other way. And so it's scary to let go of maybe some of the negative ways that I've gotten to where I am, but they've worked for me, and go explore a new way of thinking about how to navigate my daily existence or my clients' daily existence, helping them with that. But the understanding that you can always go back to the way it was, and that you always will be going back to the way it was. It's going to be a constant, noticing, making adjustments, and revising the way you're behaving or how you're being. It can be a real challenge. It's one of those things.
There's a reason that a lot of folks don't engage in this or engage in it and then back out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it shines, a sometimes not very happy making light on where one is. It's like that old saying, you think you hit a home run, but you actually started on third base kind of deal. Coming to grips with that is, I think, one of those things that is a little bit of a tough sell probably for you, but the more material that you can put out there around that, and the more reinforcement of social proof that this, though sometimes painful from an introspective standpoint, is valuable and worth it, as well as fruitful. I think that those are some of the things that I would be encouraging you to be putting forward as much as possible. Just acknowledging that people are taking a big step here. That it's perhaps a step that's long overdue, but just allowing them to feel good about taking that first step, and that it is going to be a work in progress, but it's all worth it. In terms of being able to live in a more productive, more inclusive, happier society.
Yeah. And I think it's one thing to read the book or listen to the podcast, right? But it's another thing to try and navigate the nuance and intersectionality of identities and power and privilege, and all, all of this is so nuanced and messy. And it's one thing to do that within oneself, but then to try and do that with a group, whether it's a group that's all in or not. I think that's what's been interesting as a Building Bridges staff. We're all into this. We're all wanting to do this. This is how we live, is to make sure that we're going slow to go fast, that we're using mirroring, that we're, we have certain group norms and tools and just ways that we are attempting to live this out together. And it still can be hard for us, right? So it makes sense that it would still feel hard for others. I think the other thing that we're seeing too is the potential that there is a great maybe shift, for better or worse, that folks are hiring this work in-house a little bit more, right? But what are but yeah, and so what does that mean for us then to, I think that's other conversations we're having too of, so if that's the case, then how can we support your DEI committee, or how can we support your DEI team? Because like you said, it is what we try and keep normalizing for folks is there are things you can do today, next week, next month. Yes. And what is your 5-year plan? What is your 10-year plan? What are you actually trying to create with your team? How do you want people to feel? How do you want people to be able to be themselves and share that and create space for that? I think that's what we keep trying to push people to do, that it's okay to push that boundary of what is professionalism. We are people, and it's personal before it's professional. And that's what is hard to do with adults as well, is we're trying to build up emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and opening folks up to that there's just these various ways of being, various ways of interacting, various ways of seeing the world. And how are we just opening ourselves up to all the possibilities?
Right. It's around vulnerability too.
Yes.
It seems like, and yeah, there's an authenticity and a vulnerability piece in here, which are two things that historically have not been ever present in the workforce, right? Yes. Like I know that I started my career in the early 90s, but coming out of the 80s where you were taught as a leader, you never showed any weakness, and everything was rah, and it's really interesting and fun to see that starting to change a little bit, but it's been slow going for sure, in terms of some of those changes. And so this is just a similar situation where you have people who have been successful doing it one way for however long, and all of a sudden the suggestion is that they have to start doing it a different way, and there's a lot of resistance to that kind of change.
Well, it's not even that you have to start, but like, what is the conversation? Like, are you even having a conversation around it? Of like, why do we do this? What is it in, like, is this working for us, and why? Who's right? And so there's just some of that too. Like, it's not even the right or wrong. It's the like, what are you even talking about this, or are you just rotely doing things because it's always been that way?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's entrenched for sure. I really do like a lot of the language that you're using, at least on the homepage. I think that you're on to you do a good job of demonstrating empathy, of showing how the program works and how what people can expect. I think that the kind of the bones of the homepage content are pretty good. You could probably expand on things a little bit there in terms of helping to tell that story a little bit more. I think if there were a few things that I would suggest are probably the lowest hanging fruit for kind of driving immediate signups or driving immediate revenue. It's in the phase that we call the inspire phase of the project, or of the stakeholder life cycle rather. And in the inspire phase, essentially you're trying to get people to do repeat business with you. Mm-hmm. So going back to the well and saying, hey, you went through our program a couple years ago or 6 months ago. We have, something new here that might be interesting for you, or even just getting those conversations rekindled by, asking them questions about the program. What would they like to see? What was missing that they wish that you had, or what was their favorite part of it? And essentially, I look at marketing as relationship building, and relationships are built through interactions over time, and so the more that you can dive into those interactions and get them rekindled, the more opportunity you have to not only bring people back into the fold and have them take a subsequent training or extend their training, or go that route, or get them to refer people, or at least write reviews that are that help touch on some of those major pain points and major fears that you bump up against when you're talking to people about starting a program. So, those are certainly a few places that I think I would lean into for sure in terms of trying to drive immediate engagements and revenue and project starts for you.
Yep.
Have you explored that?
I think that's also like what we're kind of rectifying, right? Is that for a while, one that we are so relationship based that is what we really heavily lean on, for better or worse, in terms of business, right? That we do get one-on-one referrals, or it's folks who we know and therefore we're telling them about it. So like a part of, this has always been an issue for the last 5 years as a Building Bridges staff member, of like, how do you explain to people what it is? And for a long time, it was like, well, you just have to come and experience it.
Sure.
Because once you're in this space where people are sharing, or where you are being asked to consider something you've never considered, or you're hearing multiple perspectives and you are learning new communication skills you've never, like for me, that was actually my journey. I moved to Colorado 5 years ago and was a adult participant myself in our facilitator training. And at that point, I had a lot of racial equity training that I was coming in with, but I was able to really delve into intersectionality and the nuance, and it impacted me in a huge way, that then I became a young adult facilitator. And then I've been orbiting Building Bridges, and now have been staff for the last 2 years. And so there's that of the continued question of how do we explain it? But also coming out of really busy 2 years, like literally trying to keep up with everything and not really having to do this. Right. And then now, like, oh boy, like what, okay, well, we didn't even have time to take down stories to get people, we're going back to people and trying to get testimonials, but folks, like, that's feeling hard. So like, man, we should have done that right away. Like how to, like, again, like some of this is all, we started to think about the process given what we experienced over the last 2 years, but now to actually do it has felt hard and discombobulating in a lot of different ways of what is happening. Is it because we did our governance transfer? Is it because it's just 2022? Is it because, I don't know, there were so many questions of what is happening.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to try to navigate that, and particularly when there's so many variables that you don't know which lever to pull. Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit a while ago. It comes back to authenticity and vulnerability, and I think that understanding that you ran a little bit before you learned to crawl or walk even. Is okay. And it's okay to actually say that when you reach out to people, say, hey, we feel a little embarrassed about this, that we didn't do this earlier. And now we're finding ourselves in a bit of a conundrum where we're trying to navigate some interesting times in this space. And we'd love to tap into your experience of working with us and get a testimonial from you. And really just laying it out there like, hey, I know this is kind of weird. We probably should have, it's been a while, but we're doing our best here and would love your help. And being a nonprofit, I think really, that does not hurt you at all in this space, because people do understand how resource challenged nonprofits can be. But I would just come at that from really from that space of vulnerability and authenticity. Like, hey, I have a favor to ask, and I know that this is a little weird. We haven't talked in a couple of years, but here's the deal. Right. And I think people would respond to that. And I think that the ones who will respond, you'll get a really very positive response around, and the ones who think that it's a little odd or whatever, they probably just won't respond. I don't think that you'll get any like negative blowback on doing that, and just kind of putting that out there. In terms of telling the story, in terms of the how, there's a framework that again, I think you're doing actually have the kind of the bones of a pretty good approach to telling the story. But you might look into a framework called Story Brand. There's a gentleman named Donald Miller who has a big team that has they'll help you with this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. However, it's not that it's not that complex. And I believe the name of his book is Building a Story Brand. I'll look that up for you and share it with you, and I'll share that in the show notes as well. My brain is not latching onto that one right at the moment. However, there's a great book that kind of walks you through the process. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I believe your site would benefit from kind of immediately is this idea of how do we tell this 7-second story? How do we get people's attention in 7 to 10 seconds to answer the questions? What is this? Who is it for? How does it make their life better? And how do they get it? Yeah. Right now, I think, and if you listen to Donald Miller, I think you're being a little, so on the continuum of clear to clever, I think that you're probably landing a little bit too far in the clever side of that continuum and might want to pull it back to clear. So instead of shift perspectives, transform the world, maybe think about DEI leadership training that helps shift perspectives and transform the world, or something like that. So you can keep a lot of that, but really kind of pull back into the, what is this exactly? So that if I have 7 seconds, I've somehow managed to make it to your site, and I have just a moment to try and figure out if I want to stay here or not, you really throw the hook into me pretty hard in terms of making me understand exactly what this is, who it's for, and how it makes my life better. You have the how do you get it in terms of the find your program or donate today. But I think I would just kind of recraft that, because essentially you're just buying time at this early stages of that kind of attract phase.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a new website for us too, because it's just also been like, again, our history of transform is more well known. And then how do we better on the website, like explain that there are these two entities, that there are these two programs?
Yeah. And that's segmentation, right? Where you're bringing people in and you're saying this is for adults. The transform program is for adult, or the shift program is for adults rather. And the transform program is for future leaders. So at that point you might think about segmenting those audiences. And you could even ask that question, I'm an adult leader seeking to shift, to shift my perspective, or I'm a future leader, looking for ways to lead everyone into the next phase of interaction and engagement, or something like that. That ran out of words there, but that might be, that might be your, how do I get this? You might start trying to actually segment your audiences and move people into one or the other of those buckets.
One of the other things that we have toyed around with is, and I don't know. Well, I'll just say it. So what we were talking about previously was kind of along the lines of like an FAQ page, which we have on there, for at least on our shift page. But like for folks who are not sure if, I guess, are not sure, maybe they're new to this DEI work, or they're not sure like what they need, but they know they need something, and or getting some words on the website that are like, are you the head of your DEI committee at your organization? Are you an executive director who is trying to like find new ways to engage your staff? Are you, et cetera?
Mm-hmm.
and not sure how much that would hurt or help us with like targeting some specific folks based on who we have worked with, to help sort of paint a little bit more of a picture that like maybe someone who has 7 seconds to come to our website and sees that maybe they are one of those people, is that enough of a hook to kind of get them in, or is that a little maybe too specific and we need to keep it more broad?
It's interesting, actually, when you started talking about that, I was thinking that one of the things that might work well for you is to create kind of a questionnaire, like, is this for me?
Mm.
And depending upon how you built that, there are a bunch of different ways to kind of build even a threaded kind of questionnaire that asks different questions depending upon the answers that you received from the previous answer. So you could set that up in a way that lets people answer, let's say 5 or even 10 questions to kind of give them their DEI score or give them an understanding of whether or not this program is right for them, or what they would probably be able to expect from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share, we have one that's kind of a marketing questionnaire. It's not threaded like what I was talking about. So it doesn't necessarily ask different questions depending upon the answers that you just gave. But I think it might be able to spawn some interest. You kind of get a score at the end, and that tells you maybe your overall health and what might come next in terms of a marketing engagement. So, similarly, I think that you might be able to do something in the DEI space in terms of just asking some questions that you might ask, me, if I were to come to you and say, hey, I think I need this, but I'm not sure. What are the 5 or so questions that you might ask me to give me a better understanding of where I sit, and do that in a non-judgmental way, but definitely, give people because I would say even someone who scores 100, probably could benefit from your services in some capacity in terms of like ongoing accountability or ongoing coaching and and assessment or something like that, just to make sure that people don't backslide or something.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like that idea, because it feels sort of similar to what we maybe do in our screen call process, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where we kind of get in front of folks and can have a conversation, and then we also have an interest form. So somebody that's potentially interested in working with us, we have, a questionnaire that they fill out. But I think having that, it feels like it's not as accessible as it could be. And so maybe putting that a little bit more forward on the website, or more accessible for folks to engage with, so that we are kind of providing that additional, this is a resource or something for you to think about your answers to these questions, and what does this mean for you?
Yeah. Like what, and just provide them with a, what's your DEI score, and for lack of a better way to frame that. But, if somebody comes in and says, well, I think I'm pretty good, and then they score a 30 out of 100, then they might be like, well, I wasn't as good as I thought I was, and I have some room for improvement. Maybe I need to talk with this team and see how we can move things the right direction.
Our own little IDI, Nikki.
Yeah,
exactly. But I'll share a couple things with you after our discussion today, as well as with the rest of the listeners, to maybe spawn some ideas there. But I think that those are a couple things that I would track down and explore in order to kind of help lay the groundwork. I mean, one of the things that's it's definitely a mindset shift. It's always frustrating when you're not as busy serving your clients as you would like to be, but being able to take advantage of that downtime is also kind of a blessing. So I know that it can be very frustrating when you want to be busy or serving, but this could be a time that you start to catch back up with some of the people who've gone through your programs in the past, as well as build out some of these tools that can help bring people into the mix in the next few months.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I can't believe it's been an hour that we've been chatting. This is amazing. I've really had a great time talking with you both and learning more about what you're up to at Building Bridges and all the good work that you're doing. How can people find out more about your programs?
You can definitely check out our website. Like Maren said, it is new to us, and so it's real pretty, and that is buildingbridgesshift.org.
Yeah, don't go to Building Bridges. That will bring you to a company in Europe. That's not us. we don't actually build bridges.
Well, you build metaphorical bridges, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I will share that in the show notes. I really appreciate you both being on the show today. It's just so much fun having these conversations, and I love talking about things with people and learning more about their organizations. I also like to try to inspire action after our conversations. If you had people who were listening to the show take any action after listening to us today, what would you have them do?
Fill out our interest form.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing that Maren said earlier, go slow to go fast. That's I feel like we should, I'm sure it's trademarked somewhere, but I feel like we should
need a sticker or something.
That's like very much a Building Bridges core value is go slow to go fast. There is so much that is pushing us through this existence to just keep going forward and keep moving and keep going, that I want to encourage folks to like pause and take a beat to just be aware of yourself, of your environment, your surroundings, your community, and really examining what is the next right step. And hopefully that brings you to us, to Building Bridges, the next right step. But if it doesn't, find that next right step for you, because reflection is important, and action, like you said, Stu, is also really important. So how do we bring those two together?
I love it. I will share that with everybody. Thank you both so much for being on the show. Again, everyone go check out buildingbridgesshift.org and, get your DEI game moving in the right direction. Thank you both so much for being on the show.
Thanks.
Bye. And there you have it. Another great episode of Relish This. Thanks again for listening. You can find past episodes of the show at relishthis.org. And remember, if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information on purpose marketing, grab your free copy of my book, Mission Uncomfortable: How Nonprofits Can Embrace Purpose-Driven Marketing to Survive and Thrive. Get your copy now at missionuncomfortablebook.com. Thanks again for listening. Come back next week, won't you?